London, 1807. Lady Zelda Langley stared at the letter in her hand, the weight of its implications far heavier than the delicate parchment warranted. The elegant script of her father, the Earl of Huntington, seemed to mock her from the page. Dearest daughter, the time has come to fulfill the agreement made at your birth. The Duke of Dorchester's son has returned from his continental tour. You shall meet Lord Quentin Devereux at Lady Harrington's ball next week. Your future is secured. Zelda placed the letter on her writing desk, her fingers lingering on the edges as if she could somehow delay the inevitable by maintaining contact with this harbinger of her fate. At 20 years of age, she had always known this day would arrive. The betrothal contract, signed when she was but hours old, had shaped her entire existence. Every lesson in deportment, every hour of French and Italian, every tedious practice at the pianoforte, all designed to prepare her for the role of a duchess. Lady Zelda. Her lady's maid, Agnes, appeared at the doorway. Your mother wishes to speak with you regarding your gown for Lady Harrington's ball. Zelda sighed, rising from her chair with practiced grace. Of course she does. Heaven forbid I meet my future husband in anything less than perfection. Is something troubling you, my lady? Zelda smoothed her muslin morning dress. I am to be married, Agnes, to a man I've never met. A contract signed before I could even open my eyes properly has determined the course of my life. But he's a duke's son, Agnes said, her eyes widening. Many young ladies would consider that fortunate indeed. Fortunate. Zelda's laugh held no humor. To have no choice in the most significant decision of one's life? Marriage is nothing but a business arrangement, I suppose, so why should my preferences matter? Still, other ladies at least have the illusion of choice during a season. As she followed Agnes down the corridor of Langley House, Zelda reflected on the peculiar limbo she had inhabited all her life, neither truly free nor yet confined to matrimony. The daughter of an earl, blessed with a substantial dowry and respectable lineage, she had been raised with the singular purpose of becoming the Duchess of Dorchester. Her future had been written in ink before she had drawn her first breath. There you are, the Countess of Huntington said as Zelda entered the drawing-room. We must finalize your ensemble for Lady Harrington's ball. The modiste awaits your fitting. Lady Huntington was a handsome woman of 45, whose bearing announced her rank without a word being spoken. She studied her daughter with narrowed eyes. You've received your father's letter, I see. Yes, mother. Zelda moved to the window, gazing out at the manicured gardens of their London townhouse. Lord Quentin returns at last to claim his prize. Zelda! Her mother's voice sharpened. This match secures our family's position for generations. The Duke of Dorchester's influence extends to the very throne. Your father and I have ensured you will want for nothing. Except the freedom to know my own heart, Zelda murmured. Hearts are unreliable guides in matters of consequence, the Countess replied, softening slightly. Your father and I married by arrangement, and affection followed. This is the way of our world. Zelda turned from the window. And if affection does not follow? Then you will have rank, fortune, and the satisfaction of duty fulfilled. Her mother crossed to her, adjusting a wayward curl that had escaped Zelda's coiffure. Now, shall we select celestial blue or ivory silk for your gown? You must make an impression. Blue, Zelda replied automatically. It matters little. Lord Quentin need only verify I have all my limbs and a passable countenance. The contracts were signed long ago. Her mother's lips tightened. Zelda, I insist you approach this meeting with decorum. The Devereux may have agreed to this match in principle, but should you behave impertinently, they could still cry off. Can they indeed? Zelda's eyes sparked with sudden interest. How fascinating. Zelda. I jest, mother, she said, though the seed of an idea had taken root. I shall be the very model of propriety when I meet Lord Quentin. The night of Lady Harrington's ball arrived with the inevitability of the changing seasons. Zelda stood before her mirror, regarding her reflection with critical detachment. The celestial blue silk gown complemented her fair complexion and brought out the unusual violet hue of her eyes. Her dark chestnut hair was arranged in an elegant style with pearl pins that had belonged to her grandmother. "You look beautiful, my lady," Agnes said, adjusting the fall of Zelda's shawl. "The Duke's son will be enchanted." "So long as I am sufficiently docile and accomplished," Zelda replied, practicing her most placid smile, the one that revealed nothing of her thoughts. A perfect vessel for the next generation of Devereux. Her father awaited her at the bottom of the grand staircase, resplendent in formal attire. The Earl of Huntington was a distinguished man whose features had only grown more aristocratic with age. "Zelda," he said, his voice unusually gentle. "You do the family proud tonight." She curtsied. "Thank you, father." He offered his arm. "The Darchester alliance has been the cornerstone of my plans for our family's advancement. I trust you understand its importance." "I have understood little else my entire life," Zelda replied. "Good." He patted her hand. "Lord Quentin is said to be an intelligent young man. Oxford educated, well-travelled, and by all accounts, not prone to excessive gambling or drink. You could do far worse. How fortunate I am that my cradle betrothal is not a complete wastrel," Zelda said, then bit her tongue at her father's warning glance. The Harrington ballroom blazed with hundreds of candles, the light reflecting off jewels and polished marble as London's elite gathered to see and be seen. Zelda felt the weight of curious stares as she entered on her father's arm, the whispers following in their wake. There she is, the Langley girl, promised to Darchester's son since birth, finally to meet tonight. Lady Huntington, Lord Huntington, their hostess greeted them effusively. "And the lovely Lady Zelda. How splendid you look, my dear. Such a momentous evening. Your generosity in hosting this occasion is most appreciated, Lady Harrington," the Earl replied smoothly. The older woman leaned closer, her voice lowering conspiratorially. "The Duke and Duchess of Darchester have already arrived with Lord Quentin. Shall I arrange the introduction now, or would you prefer to allow anticipation to build?" "Now, I think," Lord Huntington said. "No sense in prolonging matters." Zelda's heart quickened despite her determined indifference. 20 years of preparation for this single moment seemed suddenly inadequate. Lady Harrington led them through the crowd to where a distinguished couple stood in conversation with a tall young man whose back was turned to them. The Duke and Duchess were immediately recognizable by their regal bearing and the deference shown by those around them. "Your Grace," Lady Harrington said with a deep curtsy. "May I present the Earl and Countess of Huntington, and their daughter, Lady Zelda Langley." The Duke of Darchester, a stern-faced man with silvering hair, inclined his head. "Huntington. It has been some time." "Indeed, Your Grace. Not since the treaty signing with Austria, I believe." The Duchess, a handsome woman with shrewd eyes, examined Zelda with undisguised assessment. "Lady Zelda," she said. "We have waited many years for this introduction." Zelda curtsied deeply. "The honor is mine, Your Grace." "And this," the Duchess continued, turning to the tall young man beside her, "is our son, Lord Quentin." Lord Quentin Devereux turned, and Zelda's first impression was of unexpected handsomeness, tall and broad-shouldered, with features that balanced strength and refinement. Dark hair fell in a fashionable style above eyes of startling intensity. His formal attire was impeccable, his cravat tied in a complex style that bespoke both fashion awareness and precise attention to detail. She curtsied again. Lord Quentin, I trust your continental tour was illuminating. Exceedingly so, he replied, his voice rich and cultured. One discovers a great deal about both foreign lands and oneself when traveling extensively. How fascinating, she said. I should love to hear of your adventures. His eyebrow arched slightly. Would you indeed? I was given to understand young ladies prefer discussions of ribbons and lace to political upheavals and classical architecture. The condescension in his tone struck like a slap. Zelda's smile remained fixed, though her eyes narrowed fractionally. How fortunate that you have returned to England with such comprehensive knowledge of young ladies' minds as well as architecture, she replied. Your travels were productive indeed. Their parents exchanged glances, and the Duke cleared his throat. Perhaps you might honor Lady Zelda with a dance, Quentin. Of course. Lord Quentin extended his hand. If Lady Zelda would do me the honor. She placed her fingers lightly upon his, feeling the warmth of his palm as he led her toward the dance floor. The orchestra had just begun a country dance, which would allow for conversation. They took their positions opposite one another, and as the music commenced, Zelda determined to make another attempt at civility. I understand you studied at Oxford before your tour, she said as they circled each other. Which subjects most captured your interest? Classical languages, philosophy, and mathematics, he replied. I found the rigors of logical thought most satisfying. And did your logical mind find equal satisfaction in the art and culture of the continent? I appreciated the mathematical precision of Renaissance architecture and the logical progression of musical composition, he said as they joined hands to promenade. Though I found Italian opera excessively emotional. How surprising, Zelda said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. That one so devoted to logic would find emotion excessive. His eyes narrowed. You disapprove? Not at all. I merely observe that a life governed solely by reason might lack certain, essential qualities. They separated for the figures of the dance, coming together again moments later. And you, Lady Zelda, he said, what occupies your time and thoughts? I understand young ladies are kept quite busy with accomplishments designed to attract a suitable husband. How fortunate then that I was relieved of that burden at birth, she replied sweetly. My accomplishments, such as they are, serve only to prepare me for my predetermined role as your Duchess. His step faltered slightly. You speak with remarkable frankness. Do I? I thought I was merely acknowledging our mutual circumstance. We are both aware of the arrangement between our families. Indeed. His expression grew guarded. Though awareness need not equate to resentment. I don't resent the arrangement, Lord Quentin. I merely question its wisdom. The dance brought them together again, his hand at her waist as they turned. After less than 10 minutes in your company, Lady Zelda, I find myself questioning its wisdom as well. Her eyes widened in genuine surprise. You find me unsuitable, my lord. I find you insufferable, he replied, his voice low enough that only she could hear. I expected a properly raised young lady, not a contentious blue-stocking with no sense of propriety. Zelda nearly missed a step in her shock, but years of dancing lessons allowed her to continue the movements automatically while her mind reeled. And I expected a gentleman, she responded, not an arrogant pedant who forms judgments in the span of a country dance. The music ended, and they faced each other with perfect posture and mutual antipathy. I believe we understand each other perfectly, Lady Zelda, Lord Quentin said, escorting her from the floor. On that point at least, we agree, she replied, her smile brittle as she curtsied. He bowed stiffly and returned her to her parents, who waited with expectant expressions. A most illuminating dance, Lord Quentin said. If you'll excuse me, I see an acquaintance from Oxford I must greet." As he walked away, Zelda's mother leaned close. "What happened?" He seemed displeased. "He called me insufferable," Zelda whispered back. Her father's expression darkened. "What impertinence did you display?" "None, father. I merely spoke honestly about our arrangement." "Honesty," the Earl muttered. "The last refuge of the tactless. You will repair this damage, Zelda. The Darchester alliance is not optional." Before she could respond, they were approached by a cheerful young man with fair hair and an open countenance. "Lady Zelda, I'd hoped to see you tonight." "Lord Wesley," she replied, genuinely pleased to see a friendly face. "How delightful. Might I request the honor of the next dance?" Her father answered before she could. "Lady Zelda is fatigued and will be resting for the next set. Perhaps later, Lord Wesley." The young man bowed good-naturedly and departed, leaving Zelda to face her father's displeasure. "You will sit with your mother," he said firmly. "And when Lord Quentin returns, as propriety dictates he must, you will be agreeable. Am I understood?" "Perfectly, father," Zelda replied, her outward composure masking the turmoil within. As she took her seat beside her mother along the perimeter of the ballroom, Zelda's mind raced. The man to whom her entire life had been pledged found her insufferable after a single dance. Their mutual dislike should have been liberating. Perhaps the Devereux would indeed cry off, yet she felt strangely unsettled. She watched Lord Quentin across the room, noting how others deferred to him despite his youth. There was an assurance to his bearing that spoke of more than mere rank. When he smiled at something his companion said, a genuine smile that transformed his serious countenance, Zelda felt an unexpected twinge of regret that such warmth had not been directed at her. "He is watching you," her mother murmured. Zelda startled. "I beg your pardon. Lord Quentin. He has glanced this way 3 times in the past minute." True enough, when Zelda cautiously looked in his direction, their eyes met briefly before he turned away. "Likely ensuring I haven't scandalized the assembly further," Zelda said. Or perhaps wondering if his hasty judgment was in error, her mother suggested. "Not all matches begin with mutual admiration, Zelda. Your father thought me a frivolous chatterbox when we first met." "And you thought him a pompous bore," Zelda recalled from her mother's rare reminiscences. "Yet here you are, 25 years later." "Here we are," the Countess agreed. "Not all loves are written in the stars, my dear. Some must be built brick by brick, through shared experience and growing understanding." "But should they not begin with basic respect?" Zelda asked, watching as Lord Quentin conversed with Lady Harrington. "He thinks me insufferable before knowing anything of substance about my character." "And you formed no hasty judgment about him?" her mother asked pointedly. Zelda had the grace to flush. "Perhaps I was not entirely charitable in my assessment." "Then perhaps a second chance is warranted. For both of you." As the evening progressed, Lord Quentin did indeed return to their circle, duty compelling what inclination clearly did not. He engaged Zelda's parents in polite conversation about the coming parliamentary session, pointedly including Zelda only when direct questions made exclusion impossible. When the orchestra began a waltz, that scandalous dance only recently permitted in the most progressive London ballrooms, Lord Quentin hesitated, then turned to Zelda. "Would you do me the honor, Lady Zelda? I believe we might both benefit from a dance requiring less conversation." "How gallantly phrased," she replied, taking his proffered hand with resignation. "I should be delighted." On the dance floor, his hand at her waist maintained the proper distance, his posture faultless as they began the sweeping steps of the waltz. The proximity required by the dance created an intimacy that contradicted their mutual antipathy. "I must apologize," Lord Quentin said after several moments of silence. "My words earlier were ungentlemanly." Zelda looked up in surprise. "Yet you still believe them true?" "I believe first impressions are often incomplete," he amended. "And that we both might have approached our introduction with preconceptions." "A diplomatic assessment," she conceded. "Though in the interest of honesty, I should confess that I entered this evening hoping to find fault with you." His eyebrow arched. "Indeed? You have been the spectre haunting my future for 20 years, Lord Quentin. The unknown quantity to which my life was pledged without consultation." He guided her through a turn, his movements graceful despite his height. "I see. And I obliged your hopes by behaving insufferably myself. You were certainly decisive in your opinions. A family trait, I'm afraid." His expression softened marginally. "The Devereux men are not known for their patience or tact, whereas the Langley women are notorious for speaking their minds," Zelda replied. "Perhaps our fathers should have considered temperament compatibility before signing their contracts." A reluctant half-smile curved his mouth. "Perhaps. Though I suspect they were more concerned with adjoining estates in Derbyshire and complementary political influences." "How romantic," Zelda said dryly. "Romance was hardly the point," he said, then hesitated. "May I speak frankly, Lady Zelda? I doubt I could prevent you if I wished. I have only recently returned to England," he said, his voice lowering as he guided her away from other dancers. "I spent 2 years observing the marriages of the continent, the loveless alliances of the French nobility, the calculated arrangements of Italian merchant families, the cold political unions of German principalities." "And this anthropological study led you to what conclusion?" "That I had hoped for more," he admitted, surprising her. "That despite our arrangement, I had hoped to find a partner of intellect and spirit, not merely a decorative duchess to produce the requisite heir and spare." Zelda nearly missed a step. "You hoped for compatibility? Is that so astonishing? We are to spend a lifetime together, after all." The music was drawing to a close, and Zelda found herself unexpectedly reluctant for the dance to end. "And your assessment after our acquaintance thus far?" she asked. Lord Quentin regarded her thoughtfully as they completed the final turns. "That Lady Zelda Langley is certainly spirited," he said. "Her intellect remains to be determined, and her temperament appears challenging at best. But Insufferable was perhaps premature." "How magnanimous," she replied, though without the edge that would have accompanied the words an hour earlier. "And what of your assessment, my lady?" he asked as they left the dance floor. "Am I the ogre you anticipated?" "Lord Quentin Devereux is certainly opinionated," she said, matching his tone. "His intellect appears formidable, if narrowly applied, and his temperament is decidedly rigid. But Intolerable was perhaps hasty." A genuine smile transformed his features. "Progress, then." "Of the most incremental sort," she agreed. When he returned her to her parents, the atmosphere had shifted from frigid politeness to cautious civility. The Duke and Duchess of Dorchester rejoined them, and plans were made for both families to attend the theatre the following evening. "Your box or ours?" the Duke inquired. "Ours is better positioned for seeing the stage," the Earl of Huntingdon replied. "Ours is better positioned for being seen," the Duke countered. "The Huntingdon box, then," the Duchess interjected smoothly. "As Lady Zelda should be the focus of attention." As the parents continued their negotiations, Lord Quentin leaned slightly toward Zelda. "And thus begins our public courtship," he murmured. "Are you prepared to be scrutinized by all of London society?" "I have been prepared for little else my entire life," she replied. "Though I confess, I had not anticipated that my betrothed would be my harshest critic." Not your harshest, he corrected. Merely your most honest. I suspect Lady Jersey will have far more cutting observations about our compatibility. Despite herself, Zelda laughed. You underestimate the viciousness of the ton. I predict at least 3 separate assessments of our unsuitability before intermission. His eyes glinted with unexpected humor. A wager, then. If more than 3 people comment unfavorably on our match before intermission, I shall admit you understand society better than I. And if fewer, then you must admit that an Oxford education and continental travel have some value in developing observational skills. Agreed, she said, extending her hand before remembering such a gesture was improper in public. She began to withdraw it, but he clasped it briefly, the warmth of his touch lingering after he released her. Until tomorrow, Lady Zelda, he said, bowing formally. As the Langley carriage carried them home through London's lamplit streets, Zelda gazed out the window, her thoughts in unusual disarray. The evening had not proceeded as she had imagined in any respect. Lord Quentin was neither the indolent aristocrat nor the cold fish she had prepared herself to endure. He was complicated, frustrating, occasionally amusing. You seem pensive, her mother observed. Has your opinion of Lord Quentin evolved? I am reserving judgment, Zelda replied carefully. One dance is hardly sufficient to know a person's character. Wise, her father said approvingly. Though I observed some improvement in your interactions as the evening progressed. We achieved civility, Zelda acknowledged. A modest beginning. Many great marriages have begun with less, her mother said. Your Aunt Harriet threw a teacup at your Uncle Edward during their first meeting, and now they are inseparable. I shall endeavor to keep all china safely out of reach, Zelda promised, earning a rare chuckle from her father. That night, as Agnes helped her prepare for bed, Zelda found herself recalling the brief moments when Lord Quentin's reserve had softened, the flash of humor in his eyes, the half-smile that transformed his serious countenance. Those glimpses suggested depths beyond the rigid exterior he presented. Was he handsome, my lady? Agnes asked as she brushed out Zelda's long hair. The future Duke? Conventionally, I suppose, Zelda replied, unwilling to admit even to herself that she had found him distressingly attractive. Though his manners left something to be desired. But not a troll or a hunchback, Agnes said practically. That's a mercy, considering you've been promised to him since the cradle. Zelda laughed despite herself. Indeed, Agnes. Not a troll. Small blessings must be counted. Later, lying in her bed with moonlight filtering through the curtains, Zelda considered the strange twist the evening had taken. She had entered Lady Harrington's ballroom determined to find fault with Lord Quentin, only to have him declare her insufferable first. Their mutual dislike should have confirmed her worst fears about their arranged match. Instead, she found herself curious, wondering what lay beneath his controlled exterior. What experiences during his travels had shaped his expectations of marriage? What might happen if they both set aside their preconceptions and truly saw each other? Dangerous thoughts, she whispered to the darkness. Best to maintain a sensible distance until we determine if peaceful coexistence is even possible. But as sleep claimed her, her dreams were filled with waltzes and half-smiles and eyes that saw too much. The following evening found the Langleys and Devereux sharing the Huntington box at the Theatre Royal. The performance, a revival of Sheridan's The Rivals, seemed particularly apt given the circumstances. Lord Quentin, seated beside Zelda, leaned closer as the curtain rose. Our wager begins now, he murmured. 3 negative assessments of our match before intermission. I still maintain you underestimate the viciousness of society gossips, she whispered back. Particularly when a prize bachelor appears to be officially off the marriage mart. His lips twitched. "Is that what I am? A prize? The heir to a dukedom with no scandalous history, a respectable fortune, and all your teeth. Indeed, you are the very definition of a matrimonial prize. How flattering to be reduced to my title and dental health. I merely observe the standards by which the marriage-minded assess potential husbands," Zelda replied. "Your personal qualities rarely enter such calculations. And yet you seem unimpressed by my credentials," he noted. "Perhaps because I never had the luxury of calculation. Our match was determined before I could speak, let alone evaluate ducal prospects." Their whispered exchange was interrupted by the arrival of the Countess of Jersey in the adjacent box. The influential patroness of Almac's assembly rooms, and one of society's most formidable arbiters, immediately fixed her lorgnette on the Huntington box. "Lady Zelda," she called, her carrying voice drawing attention from nearby boxes. "So the rumors are true. You and Lord Quentin have at last been introduced. How fascinating." Zelda inclined her head politely. "Indeed, Lady Jersey. Lord Quentin has recently returned from his continental tour." "Just in time to fulfill that old arrangement," the Countess said, making no attempt to lower her voice. "Such a pity neither of you had a proper season to explore all possibilities." Lord Quentin stiffened beside her, but his response was impeccably polite. "Some arrangements, Lady Jersey, prove more fortuitous than one might initially suppose." "Diplomatic as well as scholarly," Lady Jersey replied. "Let us hope Lady Zelda appreciates such qualities. She has always struck me as requiring a more vivacious companion." As the Countess turned away, Lord Quentin leaned toward Zelda. "That's one. The night is young," she replied. "And Lady Jersey has planted the seed. Others will elaborate on her theme." True to her prediction, by the time the first act ended, the Marquis of Pemberton had stopped by their box to express his surprise at the match, noting that he had always imagined Lady Zelda with someone of more sporting inclinations. Lady Harrington, not to be outdone, had reminisced about Zelda's spirited debates at her literary salon, wondering if Lord Quentin's scholarly temperament could accommodate such passionate opinions. "That's 3, Zelda whispered triumphantly as the intermission began. "I believe I've won our wager." "I concede defeat," Lord Quentin said, his expression rueful. "The ton is indeed as vicious as you suggested." "Years of observation have their value," she replied. "Even without the benefit of an Oxford education." Their parents had moved to the corridor to speak with acquaintances, leaving them momentarily alone in the box. Lord Quentin turned to face her more directly. "Does it trouble you?" he asked, his voice lowered. "Their speculation about our compatibility?" Zelda considered the question seriously. "Less than I would have expected. Their opinions are based on superficial observations and society gossip. Yet you yourself expressed doubts about our suitability." "I expressed resentment at having no choice," she corrected. "Which is not quite the same thing." His gaze held hers. "And if you did have a choice?" The directness of the question startled her. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've spent so long reconciling myself to the inevitability of our match that I never allowed myself to consider alternatives." "A fair answer," he said, nodding slowly. "Though not particularly flattering to my vanity. Would you prefer a pretty lie?" "I would prefer honesty between us, Lady Zelda, even when uncomfortable." "Then in the interest of honesty, may I ask a question in return?" At his nod, she continued. "If you had a choice, would you select me as your Duchess?" Lord Quentin's expression grew thoughtful. 24 hours ago, I would have said no without hesitation. "And now?" "Now I find myself, intrigued by the possibility that Lady Zelda Langley might be more complex than my initial assessment suggested. Their conversation was interrupted by the return of their parents, followed shortly by the resumption of the play. As the drama unfolded on stage, mistaken identities, thwarted romances, and eventual reconciliations, Zelda found herself unusually aware of Lord Quentin beside her. The slight shifting of his posture when something amused him. The warmth of his arm when it occasionally brushed against hers. The scent of his sandalwood cologne. When the play concluded, the Devereux invited the Langleys to dine with them the following evening, and plans were made for a riding excursion in Hyde Park the morning after. The elaborate choreography of their courtship was proceeding exactly as society expected. Yet as Lord Quentin handed Zelda into her family's carriage, there was a moment, brief but unmistakable, when his fingers lingered against hers and their eyes met in shared recognition that something had shifted between them. Not affection, certainly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. "Until tomorrow, Lady Zelda," he said, his voice carrying a warmth absent from their first meeting. "Until tomorrow, Lord Quentin," she replied, discovering she was not entirely displeased by the prospect. Over the following week, Zelda and Lord Quentin were thrown together at every turn: dinners, musicales, art exhibitions, and carefully chaperoned walks. Society watched their interactions with avid interest, and gossip about the long-arranged match-filled drawing rooms across London. To Zelda's surprise, each encounter revealed new facets of Lord Quentin's character. During a musical evening at Lady Ashton's, she discovered his genuine appreciation for Beethoven and Mozart, his fingers unconsciously marking time against his knee as the pianist performed. At the Royal Academy exhibition, his knowledge of classical art proved extensive, though his preference for orderly neoclassicism over the emotional excesses of romanticism prompted a spirited debate between them. "Structure provides the foundation for beauty," he insisted as they stood before a pastoral landscape. "Without it, emotion becomes merely chaotic." "But without emotion, structure is merely architectural," she countered. "It is the feeling that breathes life into form." "A typically feminine perspective," he said, though without the condescension that would have marked such a comment days earlier. "Is it feminine to recognize that life requires both reason and emotion?" Zelda asked. "If so, perhaps more men should aspire to femininity." To her surprise, he laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his serious features and drew curious glances from nearby patrons. "You have a gift for challenging my assumptions, Lady Zelda. And you have a gift for making pronouncements that beg to be challenged, Lord Quentin." Their verbal sparring had evolved from antagonistic to something approaching companionable, each exchange revealing more about the other's mind. Zelda found herself anticipating their debates, preparing arguments she knew would provoke his reasoned responses. It was during their planned ride in Hyde Park, however, that the most significant shift occurred. Zelda was an accomplished horsewoman, having spent summers riding across her father's estates in Derbyshire. When Lord Quentin suggested a sedate pace appropriate for a lady, she raised an eyebrow in challenge. "I assure you, my lord, I am fully capable of managing a more vigorous ride." Society dictates a great many tedious restrictions," she interrupted. "But as we are accompanied by my groom and your father's man, propriety is satisfied. Unless you fear you cannot keep pace with me." His eyes narrowed at the challenge. "Very well, Lady Zelda. Lead on." She urged her mare forward, and soon they were cantering along the less traveled paths of the park, the spring air cool against their faces. Lord Quentin kept pace easily, his form in the saddle as perfect as his ballroom dancing. When they reached a clearing, Zelda reined in her horse, exhilarated by the brief freedom. "You ride well," Lord Quentin observed, bringing his mount alongside hers. "Better than most ladies of my acquaintance." "My father believes in practical education," she replied. horsemanship, estate management, even basic accounting, all useful skills for the mistress of a large property. Unusual for an earl to prepare his daughter so thoroughly. My father may be traditional in many respects, but he is not a fool. The Langley estates prospered under my mother's management during his diplomatic postings abroad. She glanced at him curiously. Does it disturb you? A wife with practical knowledge of estate matters. On the contrary, Lord Quentin replied thoughtfully. The Darchester properties are extensive. A duchess who understands their management would be a true partner, not merely a decorative figurehead. Partner, Zelda repeated, testing the word. Is that what you seek in a duchess? His expression grew serious. I have observed many marriages during my travels, Lady Zelda. The happiest were those where husband and wife shared both responsibilities and respect. A progressive view for the heir to a dukedom. Perhaps. Or merely a practical one. He adjusted his riding gloves. The world is changing rapidly. Napoleon has redrawn the map of Europe. The Industrial Revolution transforms our economy. Old systems must adapt or become obsolete. Including marriage, she asked. Especially marriage, he said. At least for those of us who wish for more than mere dynastic alliance. They rode on in silence for several minutes, each absorbed in their thoughts. When they rejoined their more formal pace for the fashionable hour in the park, Zelda found herself viewing Lord Quentin with new consideration. His rigid exterior concealed a mind that was, in its own way, as unconventional as her own. As their courtship progressed into its second week, the initial awkwardness between them gave way to a tentative rapport. They still disagreed frequently, his logical approach often clashing with her more intuitive reasoning, but the edge of hostility had been replaced by genuine intellectual engagement. During a dinner at the Devereux townhouse, conversation turned to the political situation in France. When Lord Quentin expressed admiration for Napoleon's administrative reforms while condemning his military aggression, Zelda found herself nodding in agreement. One can acknowledge the brilliance of the Napoleonic Code without endorsing the man's ambitions, she said. His legal reforms for women's property rights are particularly noteworthy. The Duke of Darchester looked startled. An unusual topic of interest for a young lady. My daughter has always had eclectic reading habits, the Earl of Huntingdon said, his tone suggesting this was not entirely a compliment. I find it refreshing, Lord Quentin said, surprising everyone at the table. Too many young ladies confine their conversation to fashion and gossip, as if deeper topics might strain their delicate constitutions. You encourage such interests? The Duchess asked her son with evident surprise. I believe an informed mind is an asset in any sphere, he replied, his gaze meeting Zelda's across the table. Particularly in one's life companion. The warmth that spread through Zelda at his words was both unexpected and unsettling. She had spent years preparing herself for a marriage of convenience, not one where her mind might be valued. Later that evening, as the gentlemen rejoined the ladies after their port, Lord Quentin approached where Zelda sat at the pianoforte, idly playing a Mozart sonata. You play well, he observed, turning pages of the music for her. Adequately, she corrected. Years of lessons have produced technical competence, if not particular inspiration. Yet another accomplishment to recommend you as a duchess, he said, his tone lighter than usual. My mother will be pleased. Zelda's fingers faltered on the keys. Is that all our marriage is to be? A checklist of suitable accomplishments and appropriate behaviors. Lord Quentin glanced toward their parents, engaged in conversation across the room, then lowered his voice. Walk with me in the conservatory. I believe we are overdue for a private conversation. Unchaperoned. Zelda raised an eyebrow. How shocking, my lord. The doors remain open, and we shall stay within sight of the drawing-room," he replied. "Propriety will be satisfied while allowing us a modicum of privacy. That perhaps we have both been prisoners of expectations, you of your preparation to be a duchess, I of my family's political ambitions." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "But within those constraints, there may be room for you more." "More," she echoed. "Companionship? Intellectual partnership? Perhaps even affection, in time." Zelda studied his face, finding an earnestness there she had not observed before. "You speak of affection developing from arrangement. Like my parents. Is that so impossible to imagine? We have moved from an insufferable to something approaching cordial in a mere fortnight." Despite herself, Zelda smiled. "A remarkable trajectory." "Indeed." His expression grew more serious. "Lady Zelda, I wish to propose an amendment to our arrangement." "An amendment?" I was unaware that betrothal contracts permitted negotiation after the fact. "Not to the contract itself," he clarified, "but to our approach to it. I suggest we use the remainder of the season to truly know one another before proceeding to the altar." Zelda's heart quickened. "You wish to delay the wedding?" "I wish to ensure that when we do marry, we do so with clear understanding of who we are joining our lives with," he said. "Not merely fulfilling an obligation signed before either of us could consent. And if that understanding reveals insurmountable incompatibility—" Lord Quentin's jaw tightened. "Then we face that decision when it arises. But I am not entirely convinced it will." "No?" Zelda asked, genuinely curious. "You found me insufferable not so long ago." "I found an idea of you insufferable," he corrected. "The reality has proven considerably more complex." A compliment of sorts, Zelda supposed, though hardly the stuff of romantic poetry. Still, his proposal offered something she had never expected: time to make a choice, even if within the confines of their arrangement. "Very well," she said. "I accept your amendment, Lord Quentin. We shall use the season to determine if we are, in fact, capable of building a life together that transcends mere duty." He extended his hand, and she placed her fingers in his. The warmth of his palm against hers seemed to seal their agreement more formally than any written contract. "To honest discovery," he said quietly. "To honest discovery," she echoed. As he escorted her back to the drawing-room, Zelda felt a curious lightness. For the first time since receiving her father's letter, the future seemed less a sentence to be endured and more a path to be explored. The following weeks brought a new dimension to their courtship. With their private understanding established, both Zelda and Lord Quentin approached their time together with greater openness. Society continued to observe their interactions with interest, commenting on their apparent progression from formal politeness to something resembling genuine compatibility. "They say he actually laughed aloud at something you said during Lady Pembroke's garden party," Zelda's friend, Miss Eleanor Winthrop, reported during a morning call. "The Tun is most astonished. Lord Quentin has a reputation for being rather severe." "He appreciates wit," Zelda replied, "when it's founded in substance." "How fortunate that your arranged match appears to be developing into something more congenial," Eleanor said. "Though I confess, when you first met, rumors suggested mutual antipathy." "First impressions can be misleading," Zelda said, thinking of how her own assessment of Lord Quentin had evolved. The rigid, judgmental man she had initially encountered had revealed himself to be principled rather than merely strict, thoughtful rather than simply critical. Their outings now included more substantive activities: visits to the British Museum where they debated historical interpretations, attendance at lectures at the Royal Society, and even a day spent at Lord Quentin's ancestral estate outside London, where he showed her the extensive library that had been his childhood refuge. "This was my true education," he told her as they walked among shelves laden with volumes on every subject imaginable. "My tutors provided structure, but these books offered worlds." "Which worlds call to you most?" she asked, running her fingers along leather spines. "History and philosophy initially," he replied, watching her explore. "Later mathematics and natural philosophy. The order and logic of numbers offered certainty in an often chaotic world." Zelda pulled a volume of poetry from the shelf. "And these?" "Wordsworth seems an unlikely companion to Euclid." A faint flush colored his cheeks. "My mother's influence. She insisted I develop appreciation for the arts as well as sciences." "A wise woman," Zelda said, replacing the book. "Though I suspect you preferred Pope to Wordsworth. Structure over sentiment." "You begin to know me too well," he admitted with a slight smile. "Though I found merit in both approaches. Pope's precision and Wordsworth's passion each illuminate different aspects of human experience. A surprisingly balanced view from one I initially judged as rigidly logical. As I said, first impressions are often incomplete." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "I have been guilty of the same error in judgment. When we met, I saw only what I expected to see, a society lady trained in superficial accomplishments." "And now?" "Now I see Zelda Langley," he said simply. "A woman of intellect, spirit, and surprising depth." The directness of his gaze made her heart quicken in a way that had nothing to do with propriety or arrangement. For the first time, Zelda allowed herself to consider not merely the practicalities of their match, but the man himself, his tall figure and strong features, the intensity of his attention when she spoke, the rare but transformative smile that suggested passions carefully controlled. Dangerous thoughts for a woman still uncertain of her future. As they returned to the carriage for the journey back to London, a spring shower began, the raindrops pattering against new leaves and filling the air with the scent of renewal. Lord Quentin offered Zelda his coat as they hurried across the gravel drive, his hand steadying her elbow. The unexpected intimacy of the gesture, his coat around her shoulders, the lingering warmth of his body enveloping her, created a moment of awareness that transcended their intellectual rapport. When their eyes met, Zelda saw her own confusion mirrored in his gaze. "Thank you," she said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "Of course," he replied, his usual composure momentarily shaken. The journey back to London passed in contemplative silence, each lost in private thoughts about the shifting nature of their relationship. When he handed her down from the carriage at Langley House, his fingers remained clasped around hers a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Until tomorrow," he said, his voice carrying a new note of certainty. "Until tomorrow," she echoed, finding she anticipated their next meeting with something approaching eagerness. That evening, Zelda sat at her writing desk, attempting to capture her thoughts in her journal. The page remained stubbornly blank as she struggled to articulate the transformation occurring within her. How could she explain, even to herself, that the man she had been prepared to endure as a husband had become someone whose company she increasingly enjoyed? That their debates and conversations had become the highlights of her days? That she found herself noting observations to share with him, anticipating his perspectives on matters large and small? "This is not at all what I expected," she murmured, finally setting down her pen. Agnes looked up from turning down the bed. "My lady." "Nothing, Agnes. Merely thinking aloud." "About Lord Quentin?" the maid asked with the familiarity of long service. "The household staff says you seem more amenable to the match these days." "Do they indeed?" Zelda smiled wryly. "How fortunate that my personal feelings provide entertainment below stairs as well as in drawing rooms." "It's not entertainment, my lady. It's hope." We all wish your happiness." Zelda's expression softened. "Thank you, Agnes. The truth is, I'm not certain what I feel. Lord Quentin is not the man I imagined, but whether that makes him suitable as a husband remains to be seen. If I may be so bold, my lady," Agnes said, "sometimes the heart knows before the head acknowledges it." "A dangerous proposition for a woman whose marriage has been arranged by contract," Zelda replied. "Expectations can lead to disappointment." "Or to joy," Agnes suggested gently. "Not all arranged marriages end in mere tolerance." Zelda considered her parents' relationship, begun in duty, evolved into genuine partnership, and eventually, she believed, into love. Could such a progression be possible for her and Lord Quentin? Or would their strong personalities and different approaches to life create insurmountable barriers? The season progressed, bringing warmer days and a shifting dynamic between Zelda and Lord Quentin. Their families now openly discussed wedding preparations, assuming the courtship was proceeding satisfactorily. Only Zelda and Lord Quentin knew of their private agreement to truly know each other before committing to the altar. It was at the Midsummer Ball, the most anticipated event of the season, that matters came to a head. Zelda entered the ballroom on her father's arm, her gown of silver-embroidered ivory silk creating the ethereal effect her mother had desired. Her dark hair was arranged in an elegant style adorned with pearl pins and a single white rose. Lord Quentin stood with his parents near the entrance, his formal attire emphasizing his height and the breadth of his shoulders. When he turned and saw her, his expression changed in a way that sent warmth spreading through Zelda's chest. No longer the cool assessment of their first meeting, his gaze now held appreciation and something deeper, a recognition that transcended mere physical admiration. "Lady Zelda," he said, bowing over her hand. "You look magnificent." "Thank you, Lord Quentin," she replied, suddenly conscious of the quickening of her pulse. "You are most kind." "Not kind," he corrected quietly. "Merely honest." Their families exchanged pleased glances at this display of mutual admiration. The Duke of Dorchester cleared his throat. "We have been discussing dates with Lord and Lady Huntington," he announced. "August seems an appropriate time for the wedding. The preparations can be completed by then." Zelda felt a moment of panic. August was barely 6 weeks away, far sooner than she had anticipated their decision would be required. Lord Quentin's expression revealed similar surprise, though he maintained his composure. "That seems rather precipitous, father. Surely the traditional arrangements require more time." "Nonsense," the Duke replied dismissively. "The settlements were drafted 20 years ago. The special license can be obtained immediately. There is no reason for delay when the match has been long established." "Perhaps Lord Quentin and I might discuss this privately," Zelda suggested, her voice calmer than her racing thoughts. "What is there to discuss?" her father asked with a frown. "The arrangements proceed as planned." "Nevertheless," Lord Quentin said firmly, "Lady Zelda and I would appreciate a moment to confer. If you'll excuse us." Without waiting for permission, he offered Zelda his arm and led her toward the terrace doors. Their departure drew curious glances from nearby guests, adding to the gossip that already surrounded their courtship. The terrace was mercifully deserted, the summer evening warm enough that most guests remained inside for the dancing. Fairy lights illuminated the garden beyond, creating a magical atmosphere at odds with Zelda's tumultuous emotions. "August," she said once they were alone. "They expect us to marry in 6 weeks." Lord Quentin's expression was troubled. "I had not anticipated they would press forward so quickly. I thought we would have until at least autumn to come to our decision." "What shall we do?" Zelda asked, pacing the stone terrace. "We agreed to use the season to determine our compatibility before committing to marriage." "And what have you determined, Lady Zelda?" he asked quietly. "These past weeks, have they brought you any clarity regarding our potential as husband and wife?" She stopped pacing and turned to face him. "I have discovered that you are not the man I imagined. You are more complex, more thoughtful, and occasionally more frustrating than my preconceptions allowed." "High praise indeed," he said with a hint of his rare smile. "It is not praise or censure," she replied seriously. "It is acknowledgement that you have become a person to me, not merely an obligation. But whether that makes us suited for marriage, for a lifetime together, I cannot yet say with certainty." Lord Quentin moved closer, his tall figure outlined against the fairy lights. "And if certainty remains elusive?" "Few decisions in life come with guarantees, Lady Zelda." This from the man who values logic and order above all, she challenged. "You would have me proceed without certainty?" "I would have us recognize that some leaps must be made with incomplete information," he said. "That is the nature of human connection. We cannot know everything about another person before committing to them." "But we can know enough to make an informed choice," she insisted. "Isn't that what we agreed? That our marriage should be more than duty fulfilled, that it should be a choice freely made." His expression grew serious. "Then let me ask directly, based on what you know of me now, would you choose me if you were free to do so? Not as the Duke of Dorchester's heir, but as Quentin Devereux, the man you have come to know these past weeks." The directness of the question took Zelda's breath away. Would she choose him? The man who challenged her mind, who had evolved from antagonist to something approaching a friend, whose rare smiles had begun to feature in her dreams. Whose presence she increasingly sought, whose opinion she valued even when they differed from her own. Before she could formulate a response, a commotion from the ballroom interrupted them. Lady Jersey emerged onto the terrace, followed by several curious onlookers. "There you are," she exclaimed. "Such impropriety, to abandon your families for a private tete-a-tete. Though I suppose when one has been betrothed since birth, certain liberties might be excused." Zelda felt her cheeks warm at the insinuation. "We were merely discussing wedding arrangements, Lady Jersey." "Indeed?" The Countess arched an eyebrow. "Well, you must return at once. The Duke of Dorchester is announcing your August nuptials to the Assembly." Lord Quentin's expression hardened. "Without consulting us? That is unacceptable." "Your father is a duke, Lord Quentin," Lady Jersey reminded him. "He rarely concerns himself with what others find acceptable or unacceptable." As they followed her back into the ballroom, Zelda felt a growing sense of being swept along by forces beyond her control, exactly as she had feared when first learning of her betrothal. All their careful exploration, their agreement to choose freely rather than merely submit to arrangement, seemed suddenly meaningless in the face of familial and social expectations. They entered the ballroom to find the Duke of Dorchester indeed addressing the gathered guests, his commanding presence ensuring rapt attention. "Delighted to announce that the long-anticipated union between our families will be solemnized on August the 12th at St. George's, Hanover Square. Lady Zelda will make a magnificent Duchess of Dorchester when the time comes." Applause rippled through the assembly as Zelda and Lord Quentin rejoined their families. The congratulations began immediately, surrounding them with well wishes and curious inquiries about wedding details. Through it all, Zelda maintained her social smile, but inside she felt hollow. The decision had been made for them, just as it had been 20 years ago. Their careful journey toward genuine understanding and free choice had been rendered meaningless by the Duke's announcement. Lord Quentin seemed similarly affected, his responses to congratulations mechanical, his expression closed. When the orchestra began a waltz and he led her onto the dance floor, Zelda felt the tension in his frame. "I apologize," he said as they moved through the steps. "I had no idea my father..." "What are you suggesting?" she asked. "That we continue as we have been, coming to know one another, determining our compatibility, regardless of announced dates or familial pressures." "And if we determine we are not suited," she pressed, "what then? Would you defy your father, risk scandal and disappointment?" "If necessary," he said without hesitation. "I will not enter a lifetime commitment without conviction, regardless of contract signed before my birth." His certainty both reassured and unsettled her. Such defiance would have consequences for both our families. "I am aware." His expression softened slightly. "But I ask again, Zelda, based on what you know of me now, would you choose me if you were truly free to do so?" The omission of her title made the question more intimate, more personal. Zelda looked into his eyes, searching for her own truth. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "You have become important to me. Our conversations, our debates, even our disagreements have come to shape my days in ways I never anticipated. But marriage is a lifetime commitment." "Then we continue our exploration," he said firmly. "August 12th approaches, but our decision need not be made until we stand before the altar." The waltz ended, and as they left the dance floor, Zelda felt both comforted and conflicted by his words. Their private understanding remained, but the pressure had intensified. Society now expected an August wedding, and disappointing such expectations would come at significant cost. The following days brought an onslaught of wedding preparations. Seamstresses arrived to begin work on Zelda's trousseau, discussions of wedding breakfasts and guest lists occupied the Countess's attention, and the settlements, drafted decades earlier, were reviewed by solicitors. Through it all, Zelda and Lord Quentin maintained their private agreement, using every opportunity to deepen their understanding of one another. Their outings now included more personal revelations, childhood memories, hopes for the future, fears, and dreams long held private. During a visit to the Darchester estate in Derbyshire, where they would live after their marriage, Lord Quentin showed Zelda the gardens his mother had designed, the tenant farms he had helped modernize, and the small lake where he had learned to swim as a boy. "This place has shaped me," he told her as they walked along the shore. "The responsibility of knowing it will one day be mine to steward has influenced every decision I've made." "A heavy burden for a child," Zelda observed. "But one that gave purpose," he replied. "I never questioned my path because it was so clearly defined from birth. Much like our betrothal." "And now," she asked, "do you question it?" He was silent for a long moment, skipping a stone across the still water. "I question the method, not the outcome." "Meaning?" "I believe we might have found each other without our family's arrangement," he said, surprising her. "Our circles overlap naturally. We share interests and connections. Perhaps we would have met at a ball or dinner and discovered compatibility through normal courtship." "A romantic notion from a man devoted to logic," she teased gently. "Perhaps you have influenced me more than I realized," he admitted with a small smile. "Or perhaps I am simply recognizing patterns. We are well matched in many ways, Zelda. Our temperaments complement rather than mirror each other. Your intuition balances my logic. My structure supports your creativity. You make marriage sound like an architectural project," she said, though she was touched by his assessment. "In some ways, it is a structure built to weather time and circumstance." He turned to face her directly. "But the foundation must be sound. That is what I hope we are building now, regardless of how our paths first crossed." His words stayed with Zelda as the wedding date approached. Each day brought new insights into the man she was to marry, his sense of responsibility, his unexpected humor, his capacity for growth and change. She found herself anticipating their time together, missing his perspective when they were apart, even dreaming of the future they might build. Was this love? Or merely the natural outcome of proximity and shared purpose? Zelda could not be certain, and the uncertainty troubled her. With 2 weeks remaining before their wedding, an unexpected complication arose. The Marquis of Dartmoor, a notorious fortune hunter with a rakish reputation, returned to London after years abroad. His appearance at Lady Winthrop's musicale caused a stir, particularly when his attention fixed immediately on Zelda. "Lady Zelda Langley," he said, bowing over her hand with excessive flourish. "I have heard much about the beauty betrothed to Darchester's heir. The rumors, I see, were not exaggerated." "Lord Dartmoor," she acknowledged coolly, withdrawing her hand. "Your reputation precedes you as well." "All slander, I assure you," he replied with a wolfish smile. "May I hope for the honor of a dance later this evening?" Before Zelda could refuse, Lord Quentin appeared at her side, his expression carefully neutral though tension radiated from his tall frame. "Lady Zelda's dance card is full this evening, Dartmoor," he said smoothly. "Perhaps another time." "Devereux." The Marquis nodded with feigned cordiality. "How fortunate you are in your betrothed. One wonders if such a spirited lady truly suits the serious heir to Darchester, however." "I believe that is for Lady Zelda to determine," Lord Quentin replied, his tone deceptively mild. "Not speculating observers." "Indeed?" Dartmoor's eyebrow arched. "How progressive of you to consider her preferences. Most arranged marriages proceed regardless of the lady's inclinations." The implied criticism hung in the air, accompanied by Dartmoor's knowing smirk. Zelda felt Lord Quentin tense beside her and placed her hand on his arm in a restraining gesture. "Lord Quentin has always shown the greatest consideration for my wishes," she said firmly. "Our betrothal may have been arranged by our families, but our marriage will be a partnership of mutual respect." "How revolutionary," Dartmoor replied, his tone making the words an insult. "Though one wonders if you might have preferred a husband with more animation." "I prefer a husband with substance," Zelda countered, "not merely superficial charm." The Marquis's smile tightened, but before he could respond, they were interrupted by the beginning of the musical performance. He bowed and withdrew, but not before casting a speculative glance that made Zelda uneasy. "I apologize," Lord Quentin said quietly as they took their seats. "I should not have engaged with his provocations." "You defended me admirably," she assured him. "Though Dartmoor seems determined to cause mischief. He has a reputation for pursuing women on the verge of advantageous marriages," Lord Quentin explained, his voice low. "He delights in creating doubt and discord." "Then he will be disappointed in this instance," Zelda replied firmly. But as the evening progressed, the Marquis's insinuation seemed to multiply throughout the gathering. Whispers followed Zelda and Lord Quentin, speculation about their compatibility, wondering if the serious heir to Darchester could truly satisfy the spirited Lady Zelda, suggesting the arranged match might not be as harmonious as it appeared. By the time they departed, Zelda could see the strain in Lord Quentin's expression, though he maintained his composed exterior. "Don't let him trouble you," she said as he handed her into her carriage. "Dartmoor thrives on creating dissension." "It's not his tactics that concern me," Lord Quentin replied, his voice unusually subdued. "It's the possibility that his observations contain some truth." Before she could respond, he closed the carriage door and stepped back, bowing formally as the vehicle pulled away. Zelda sat back against the cushions, troubled by the uncertainty she had glimpsed in his eyes. For all his logical approach to their relationship, Lord Quentin was not immune to doubt, particularly regarding his ability to make her happy. The following days brought increased scrutiny of their match. The Marquis of Dartmoor appeared at every event they attended, his attentions to Zelda just proper enough to avoid outright impropriety while clearly designed to provoke Lord Quentin. Worse, his whispered comment, "I respect him," Zelda said more carefully. Which is a far better foundation for marriage than momentary infatuation. But Eleanor's observation lingered in Zelda's thoughts. Had respect evolved into something deeper during their weeks of courtship? The possibility both thrilled and terrified her. To love a man she was contractually obligated to marry seemed the height of convenience, or the pinnacle of vulnerability, depending on whether he returned such feelings. Lord Quentin, meanwhile, grew increasingly reserved as the wedding approached and Dartmoor's campaign of innuendo continued. During a garden party at Holland House, Zelda finally confronted him about his withdrawal. "You've barely spoken 3 sentences together today," she said when they found a moment of privacy among the hedgerows. "Has something occurred to distress you?" He hesitated, then gestured to where Dartmoor held court among a group of admiring listeners. "He suggested to Lord Pemberton that you agreed to our marriage only from duty, not inclination. That given true freedom, you would choose a more suitable match. And you give credence to his slander?" Zelda asked, genuinely surprised. "Not to his motives, which are transparently self-serving," Lord Quentin replied. "But to the core of his insinuation, that perhaps you deserve someone who can match your vivacity and wit more naturally. Someone less confined by duty and propriety." Zelda studied his troubled expression, realizing that beneath his logical exterior, Lord Quentin harbored insecurities about his worthiness as a husband. Not regarding his title or fortune, but his ability to make her happy. "Lord Dartmoor," she said carefully, "represents everything superficial and transient in society. He cultivates charm because he lacks substance. He offers excitement without security, passion without principle. And I represent the opposite extreme," Lord Quentin acknowledged. "Security without excitement, principle without passion. Is that truly how you see yourself?" she asked softly. "A man devoid of passion." His eyes met hers, and for the first time, he allowed her to see the depth of emotion he typically concealed. "I was raised to control my passions, not to lack them. The heir to Darchester cannot afford to be ruled by temporary feeling. There is middle ground between uncontrolled emotion and complete suppression," Zelda said. "A balance that allows for both reason and feeling. A balance I have only begun to discover in your company," he admitted. "You challenge me to reconsider convictions I once thought immutable." "As you challenge me," she replied. "My impulsiveness tempered by your thoughtfulness. My intuition complemented by your logic." He took a step closer, his voice lowering. "Is that enough, Zelda? For a lifetime together?" "I don't know," she answered honestly. "But I believe it might be the beginning of something worth discovering." A call from the main garden interrupted them. Guests were being summoned for the afternoon's entertainment. As they turned to rejoin the party, Lord Quentin offered his arm. "We have 1 week until our wedding," he said quietly. 1 week to decide if we proceed as planned or consider alternatives. Alternatives would cause considerable scandal, Zelda reminded him. "I'm aware. But I will not hold you to a contract you did not sign willingly, regardless of consequence." His willingness to place her happiness above duty and expectation touched her deeply. As they walked back to the gathering, Zelda realized that whatever her feelings might be, they had progressed far beyond mere respect or compatibility. The question was whether such feelings were sufficient foundation for a lifetime together. The week before the wedding passed in a whirl of final preparations and social obligations. The Marquis of Dartmoor continued his campaign of insinuation, though his direct approaches to Zelda were consistently rebuffed. Lord Quentin maintained his public composure while privately ensuring Zelda knew she still had choice in their future. "If you wish to postpone, we can create a plausible excuse," he told her during a rare moment alone in her family's garden. "A sudden illness, perhaps." Time to reconsider without the pressure of imminent ceremony. And if I wish to proceed, she asked. Then we marry as planned, he said simply. And build our life together day by day, discovering how two people brought together by arrangement might create something of their own design. The evening before their wedding, both families gathered for a formal dinner at the Duke of Dorchester's London residence. The atmosphere was celebratory, the culmination of 20 years of planning finally at hand. During the meal, the Duke raised his glass in a toast. To the union of our houses, long anticipated and soon to be realized. May the Devereux and Langley lines prosper together for generations to come. To family, the Earl of Huntingdon added, nodding to the young couple. As glasses clinked and congratulations flowed, Zelda felt Lord Quentin's gaze upon her. When she met his eyes, the question there was clear, "Are you certain?" Before she could respond, a commotion at the dining room door interrupted the festivities. The butler appeared, his usual composure disturbed. "Your Grace, I apologize for the intrusion, but the Marquis of Dartmoor insists on speaking with Lady Zelda immediately. He claims it is a matter of utmost urgency." A shocked silence fell over the table. The Duke's expression darkened dangerously. "The audacity," he began, but Zelda raised her hand. "I will speak with him," she said firmly. "And put an end to his interference once and for all." "Absolutely not," her father protested. "The man clearly intends some final mischief before your wedding." "I agree with Lady Zelda," Lord Quentin said unexpectedly. "Let her confront him directly, with me in attendance to ensure propriety. Better to address his schemes openly than allow them to fester." After further protest, it was agreed that Zelda would receive the Marquis in the drawing-room, with Lord Quentin and the Earl present. As they left the dining-room, Lord Quentin touched her arm lightly. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "Dartmoor can be sent away." "No," Zelda replied with determination. "I want to face him. Whatever game he plays ends tonight." The Marquis of Dartmoor waited in the drawing-room, his evening attire immaculate though his expression showed signs of strain. When Zelda entered with Lord Quentin and her father, he bowed with exaggerated formality. "Lady Zelda, I apologize for the intrusion, but I felt compelled to speak with you before tomorrow's ceremony." "What urgent matter brings you to interrupt our family dinner, Lord Dartmoor?" she asked coolly. "Concern for your happiness," he replied, his voice taking on a theatrical sincerity. "I could not, in good conscience, allow you to proceed with this marriage without offering an alternative." Lord Quentin's posture stiffened, but his expression remained controlled. "Your concern is noted but unnecessary. Lady Zelda is quite capable of determining her own happiness." "Is she?" Dartmoor challenged. "Or is she merely fulfilling an obligation imposed before she could speak?" "The lady deserves a choice, Devereux." "A choice I have explicitly offered her," Lord Quentin replied evenly. Dartmoor's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise before his customary smirk returned. "How noble! Yet I wonder if Lady Zelda fully understands her options. A marriage to the heir of Dorchester offers prestige and security, certainly. But might not a union based on genuine affection provide greater satisfaction?" "And you offer such affection?" Zelda asked skeptically. "I offer liberation from duty," Dartmoor said, his voice lowering persuasively. "Adventure instead of obligation. Passion rather than arrangement." The Earl of Huntingdon stepped forward, his expression thunderous. "This is outrageous. Lord Dartmoor, you will leave immediately or be removed." "Not before Lady Zelda gives her answer," the Marquis insisted. "Will you bind yourself to a man selected by contract, or will you choose freedom and genuine feeling?" Zelda looked between the two men, Lord Dartmoor with his practiced charm and empty promises, Lord Quentin with his quiet strength and honest complexity. The choice was not between duty. Lord Dartmoor, she said finally, your offer, if it can be dignified with such a term, represents exactly the kind of shallow thinking I have come to reject. You speak of freedom while offering only another form of constraint, one based on momentary desire rather than lasting commitment. The Marquis's expression faltered. You cannot prefer this arrangement to what? Zelda interrupted. Your practice seductions? Your hollow promises? Lord Quentin has offered me something far more valuable than the fleeting attention you provide. He has offered respect, partnership, and the freedom to choose our path together. Pretty words, Dartmoor scoffed, but can he offer passion? Does his logical mind allow for the deeper emotions a woman craves? That, Zelda said firmly, is not your concern. My choice is made, Lord Dartmoor. I suggest you accept it with what grace you can muster. For a moment, the Marquis seemed poised to continue his argument, but something in Zelda's resolute expression finally penetrated his confidence. His shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly before he recovered his customary arrogance. As you wish, Lady Zelda, he said with a mocking bow. I shall leave you to your arranged future. Perhaps one day you'll recall my offer and wonder what might have been. I doubt it very much, she replied coolly. After the Marquis had been escorted from the house, the Earl returned to the dining room, leaving Zelda alone with Lord Quentin. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of her declaration hanging between them. Did you mean what you said? Lord Quentin finally asked. About choosing our path together. Zelda met his gaze directly. Every word. Dartmoor offered illusion disguised as freedom. What lies between us may have begun as arrangement, but it has become something of our own making. And is that enough? He pressed, echoing his question from days earlier. For a lifetime together? I believe it can be, she said softly. With continued honesty and willingness to grow together. He moved closer, taking her hands in his. Then may I be completely honest now, Zelda? Without the constraints of propriety or expectation. At her nod, he continued, his voice lower, more intimate than she had ever heard it. When we first met, I called you insufferable because you challenged every assumption I had made about my future Duchess. You were neither docile nor predictable. You questioned when I expected acceptance, argued when I anticipated agreement. You disrupted the orderly future I had envisioned. Not an auspicious beginning, she murmured. But a necessary one, he countered. Because through that disruption, I discovered something I had never anticipated finding in an arranged marriage. And what was that? A woman who sees me, not merely the heir to Darchester, but Quentin Devereux, with all my flaws and limitations. A woman whose mind challenges mine, whose perspective enriches my understanding of the world. A woman I have come to admire, respect, and yes, Zelda, to love. The declaration stole her breath. Love? I did not expect it, he admitted, his fingers tightening around hers. I was prepared for compatibility, for mutual respect, perhaps eventually for affection. But these past weeks have transformed my understanding of what marriage might be, not merely duty fulfilled, but joy discovered. Zelda's heart seemed to expand in her chest, years of certainty that marriage would be at best a practical partnership dissolving in the face of his confession. The man she had once thought coldly logical was revealing depths of feeling she had only glimpsed in rare, unguarded moments. I cannot promise I will always be easy to live with, he continued when she remained silent. My mind tends toward order, my temperament toward restraint. But I can promise that I will always value your happiness as essential to my own. That I will listen when we disagree, grow when I fall short, and cherish the extraordinary woman you are. Quentin, she said, using his given name for the first time. I 2. Have discovered something unexpected in our arranged match. I entered this courtship believing marriage was merely a social contract, love a luxury separate from practical reality. I was prepared to make the best of duty, to find satisfaction in the role of Duchess if not in the man himself. She stepped closer, her voice softening. Instead, I found a man of principle and integrity. A mind that challenges and respects my own. A heart more generous than first appearances suggested. And in discovering you, I have discovered something within myself, a capacity for feeling I had protected behind walls of pragmatism and wit. And what feeling is that? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Love, she replied simply. Not the fleeting infatuation Dartmoor offered, but something deeper, steadier, yet no less profound. A foundation upon which we might build a lifetime. The smile that transformed his features then was unlike any she had seen before, unguarded, radiant with joy. Without words, he drew her into his arms, his embrace conveying what propriety still prevented him from expressing more directly. When they returned to the dining room, their families noticed the change immediately, a certainty in their bearing, a harmony in their interaction that had not been present before. The celebration continued with renewed enthusiasm, though none but Zelda and Quentin knew exactly what they celebrated, not merely an arrangement fulfilled, but a choice freely made. The following day, St. George's Church was filled with London's elite, come to witness the culmination of the long-anticipated alliance between the houses of Devereux and Langley. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, illuminating the altar where Quentin waited, his tall figure commanding informal attire. When the doors opened and Zelda appeared on her father's arm, a murmur rippled through the congregation. Her ivory gown, adorned with silver embroidery and seed pearls, complemented her dark hair and fair complexion perfectly. But it was her expression that drew notice, not the resigned composure expected of a bride fulfilling duty, but a radiant certainty that transformed her beauty from merely physical to transcendent. As she moved down the aisle toward Quentin, Zelda recalled their journey, from mutual antipathy to grudging respect, from intellectual appreciation to genuine affection, and finally to love discovered within the framework of arrangement. When their eyes met, she saw in his gaze the same recognition, that what had begun as obligation had become choice, freely and joyfully made. When the Archbishop asked, "Who giveth this woman to be married to this man?" the Earl of Huntingdon placed Zelda's hand in Quentin's with visible satisfaction, unaware that the true giving had occurred the previous evening, when two hearts had chosen each other despite rather than because of familial expectation. Their vows, spoken in clear voices that carried to the farthest reaches of the church, held meaning beyond the traditional words, a private understanding of partnership, respect, and love that transformed ancient promises into personal covenant. When Quentin placed the ring on Zelda's finger, a Devereux family heirloom of sapphires and diamonds, his hand was steady, his expression one of certainty rather than mere duty fulfilled. "With this ring, I thee wed," he said, his voice carrying unexpected emotion. "With my body, I thee worship. With all my worldly goods, I thee endow." As the Archbishop pronounced them husband and wife, Quentin leaned close to whisper words meant for Zelda alone. "From insufferable to indispensable," he murmured. "Our journey begins in truth today." "From arrangement to choice," she whispered back. "May we never forget the difference." Their first kiss as husband and wife, though appropriately restrained for church, contained a promise of passion deferred but not denied, the beginning of a lifetime of discovery together. At the wedding breakfast that followed, the Duke of Dorchester raised his glass in a final toast. "To Lady Zelda and Lord Quentin, whose union fulfills the hopes of two families and begins a new chapter in the Devereux legacy." Quentin stood, offering his hand to Zelda, who rose beside him. "If I might add to my father's toast," he said, his voice carrying across the assembled guests. "To arrangements that become choices. To duty that transforms into desire. and to the lady who taught me that the heart's wisdom sometimes exceeds the mind's calculations. As they departed amid shower of flower petals and well wishes, bound for the